Tonight, we open the archive before there was anything to remember. Before the old gods walked beneath the branches of Yggdrasil, before Thor carried his hammer, before Odin gave an eye for wisdom, and long before the first human fire burned against a northern night, there was only a great and silent emptiness. The old Norse stories gave that emptiness a name, Ginnungagap. It was not a place in the ordinary sense. There were no roads leading into it, no villages, no mountains, no shorelines beneath a dark northern sea. There was no sun crossing the sky, no moon, no stars, no earth beneath them. Only a yawning space between things that had not yet taken shape. It is difficult now to know exactly how the people who first carried these stories imagined that beginning. The stories themselves were old before anyone wrote them down. For generations they passed from voice to voice, remembered by poets, changed slightly in the telling, heard in halls where firelight moved across timber walls, and carried across years in a world where memory did much of the work that books would later do. What survives does not come to us from one ancient book containing the entire Norse faith. There is no single manuscript in which every god, every world, and every story is arranged cleanly from beginning to end. Instead, there are poems, fragments, allusions, names, stories preserved in later prose, and sometimes silence. Centuries afterward, much of what gives Norse mythology its familiar shape was gathered and organized in medieval Iceland. One of the most important figures in that preservation was Snorri Sturluson, an Icelander writing in the early 13th century, long after Christianity had become established in Iceland. Snorri was looking backward toward stories that were already old. He drew upon poems, poetic traditions, and material that had survived from earlier generations. And because of that distance, the archive is never perfectly complete. Sometimes an older poem tells us one thing. Sometimes later prose gives the story a clearer shape. Sometimes two traditions sit beside one another without agreeing perfectly. Sometimes a name survives, while the story that once surrounded it has disappeared. So tonight, as we move through this old northern world, we will not pretend that every missing piece is known. Where the stories are uncertain, we can allow them to remain uncertain. There is something fitting about that. Old stories do not always reach us whole. Sometimes they arrive like stones found beneath moss, their edges softened by weather, their inscriptions incomplete, but enough remaining to know that someone once placed them there. Some of the poems preserved in the collection we now call the Poetic Edda speak in voices that feel almost impossibly distant. Osiris remembers the beginning of the world. A mysterious speaker describes the halls of gods. Odin questions beings who may know what he does not. Wisdom is offered in riddles. Ancient names appear only once, then vanish again. The effect is less like opening a modern encyclopedia and more like entering a room after everyone has left, finding fragments of conversation still written on the walls. Enough survives to follow the great shape of the story. A beginning in emptiness. A world formed between ice and fire. Gods who build, wander, fight, make promises, and break them. A tree that stands through the worlds. A wolf in chains. A serpent beneath the sea. A beloved god who dreams of his own death. And somewhere ahead, an ending that even Odin cannot permanently prevent. But that ending is still very far away. For now, there is no Thor, no Loki, no Valhalla, no human settlement beneath the snow, no ship crossing a cold sea, no road climbing toward a distant hall. And so, before Asgard, before Midgard, before Odin, we return to Ginnungagap, to the silence before the story had begun. To the north of that emptiness lay Niflheim, a region of cold, mist, and ancient ice. From it came frozen rivers, cold spread outward, frost gathered upon frost. Far to the south was Muspel, or Muspelheim in the later organized telling, a region associated with fire, heat, and forces that could not remain still. And between the cold of the north and the fire of the south stretched the great gap, Ginnungagap. Imagine no horizon yet, no morning, no evening, only cold reaching slowly from one direction and warmth reaching slowly from another. The frozen rivers from the north extended into the emptiness. Ice gathered, layer upon layer. Frost settled over it. And from the south, heat moved toward the cold. Where the two met, the frozen rime began to melt. Drops formed. Water moved where there had been only stillness. And somewhere in that meeting of opposites, the first great living figure of the Norse creation story appeared. His name was Ymir. Ymir was not one of the gods who would later gather in Asgard. He belonged to something older, a beginning before the familiar order of things. From him would come generations of beings, often translated into English as giants, though the old Norse traditions surrounding the Jötnar are more complicated than the enormous creatures the English word giant might bring to mind. Some are monstrous, some are ancient. Some possess knowledge the gods themselves seek. Some become enemies of the gods. Some marry them. Some are their parents. Some are beautiful. Some terrifying. Some behave almost like forces of landscape. Mountain, winter, sea, wildness, and the dangerous spaces beyond familiar human boundaries. There is no perfectly clean wall between gods and Jötnar. The families cross, the stories cross. Even Odin himself will have Jötun ancestry. Thor will be born of a mother associated with the earth and with giant ancestry. Loki will move among the gods despite his own complicated origins. This is worth remembering. The Norse cosmos does not begin with one race of good beings facing another race of evil beings. It begins with relationships, kinship, old obligations, hospitality, marriage, feuds, promises, and beings who may sit beside one another at a feast in one story, then meet as enemies in another. Ymir himself belongs to that older beginning, and as he sleeps, the strange process of creation continues around him. The surviving tradition describes other beings emerging through him, life appearing before there is yet a proper world in which life can live. Then from the melting frost comes another figure, not a warrior, not a god, not a dragon, a cow, a great primordial cow named Auðhumla. The image is almost peaceful after the vastness of the empty gap. Auðhumla feeds Ymir with streams of milk, and she herself finds nourishment by licking the salty blocks of ancient ice. For 3 days, she licks at the frozen surface, slowly, patiently. On the first day, hair appears. On the second, a head. And on the third, the complete shape of another being emerges from the ice. His name is Buri. From Buri comes Bor, and Bor takes as his wife Bestla, a woman from the family of the Jötnar. From them come 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. Even here, before the earth has been shaped, the family lines have already crossed. The sons who will help establish the divine order are born partly through the lineage of the beings later remembered as giants. Nothing is cleanly separated. Nothing ever really will be. For a time, there is still no human world. Ymir exists. Auðhumla moves over the ice. The first divine generations appear. Cold remains in the north, fire remains in the south, and between them, something new is waiting to be made. Then Odin, Vili, and Ve turn against Ymir. The surviving tradition tells us that the 3 brothers kill Ymir. It is a violent moment at the beginning of the cosmos, but we need not dwell upon violence tonight, because what matters for the shape of the old story is what happens afterward. Ymir's death becomes creation. The brothers take the immense body of the ancient being, and from it they form the world. From his flesh, the earth. From his blood, the waters, rivers, and sea. From his bones, the mountains. From his teeth and broken fragments of bone, stones, rocks, and the hard places of the land. From his skull, they make the vault of the sky. And from what had once been only emptiness, a landscape begins to emerge. Imagine it slowly, not as a world appearing in an instant, but as if the darkness itself were being given boundaries. A shoreline appearing, then another, a mountain lifting into the distance, water settling into the deep places, rock cooling beneath a new sky. Something now has an edge, a place where sea ends and land begins, a place where stone rises, a place where water can move downhill. The brothers place sparks from the fiery region of Muspel in the heavens. Lights appear above the young world. The old stories eventually speak of sun, moon, stars, and the movements by which human beings will one day measure time. Time itself begins to acquire rhythm. There can be morning now, evening, winter, summer, the long northern darkness, and the return of light. In later mythic storytelling, the sun and moon do not move through the heavens in perfect security. They are pursued. The cosmos itself contains danger. Even light travels beneath the possibility of being overtaken. But for now, the important thing is simpler. The sky is no longer empty. There is movement above the earth. Around the region that will become home to human beings, the gods establish a protected enclosure, Midgard, the middle enclosure. The very name suggests a world with boundaries, an inside and an outside, a place where people may live, surrounded by regions that are older, stranger, and less controlled. The gods are said to use Ymir's eyelashes, or brows in some translations, to make the fortification around Midgard. Even the smallest remaining parts of the first being become useful in the shaping of order. Beyond Midgard lie other regions, other halls, other beings, other roads. The human world is not the whole cosmos. It is only one protected place within something vastly larger. The image is worth holding for a moment. A young earth beneath unfamiliar stars. Mountains that have never yet been crossed. Rivers that have never been named. A sea with no human boat upon it. No footprints. No fields, no smoke above a roof, no story told beside a fire. The world exists, but no human being has yet opened their eyes within it. Then, according to the tradition preserved in the Eddic material, the gods come upon 2 pieces of wood, or perhaps 2 trees. The surviving accounts do not describe the moment in exactly the same way. From these forms, the first human pair are created, Ask and Embla. The gods give them what human life requires: breath, awareness, warmth, speech, senses, color, the capacity to live within this newly ordered world. And so, human beings enter the Norse creation story not from gold, not from the palace of a king, not from some completed city, but from wood near the edge of the water. Something ordinary, something that might otherwise have washed ashore unnoticed. There is a gentleness in that image, the first people standing beneath a sky that had only recently been raised, with the sea beside them, and an entire human future still waiting. They do not know Odin's stories yet. They have never heard thunder and named Thor. There are no rune stones, no poems, no graves, no ships, no winter stores, no children sleeping near a hearth. All of that lies somewhere ahead, but the cosmos surrounding them is already vast. And to understand even a little of that world, we must look towards something larger than Midgard itself. A tree, Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil is usually called the world tree, an immense ash standing somehow within the structure of existence itself. Its branches extend outward, its roots reach downward, toward places inhabited by gods, Jotnar, the dead, and beings whose stories survive only in fragments. It is tempting to imagine Yggdrasil as a literal tree, large enough to hold 9 little worlds among its branches. Modern illustrations often do exactly that. 9 circles, 9 names, 9 neatly arranged regions. But the old sources are not so tidy. They speak of 9 worlds. They describe many named regions. They tell us of roots, wells, bridges, halls, rivers, gates, and roads. But they never hand us one universally agreed diagram. The familiar modern list of 9 worlds is therefore more orderly than the surviving medieval material itself. And perhaps that is not a problem. Yggdrasil does not have to behave like a map. It works better as a center, a living image around which different regions, stories, and destinies can be understood. Near one root is a well associated with wisdom, Mimir's well, a place Odin himself will seek. Elsewhere lies the well of Urður, associated with the Norns. Urður, Verdandi, Skuld. Their names are often interpreted through ideas of what has happened, what is becoming, and what may yet be. They are connected with fate, with the shaping of lives, and with forces even the gods themselves cannot simply command away. The tree must be tended. Water and material from the well are associated with preserving it. The center of the cosmos is alive, and living things require care. High in the branches, an eagle is said to sit. Between its eyes, in some traditions, is a hawk. 4 deer move among Yggdrasil's foliage. Beneath, Nidhogger gnaws at a root. And along the trunk runs a creature named Ratatoskr, a squirrel. Ratatoskr carries words between the eagle above and Nidhogger below, often insults. Even the cosmic tree has gossip moving through it. There is something wonderfully strange about that. The structure of existence may contain wells of fate, ancient serpents, gods, the dead, and roots stretching into mystery. And still, somewhere along the trunk, a squirrel carries arguments back and forth. Old mythology can move from the enormous to the almost comic without warning. That is part of its texture. Yggdrasil itself is not untouched. It is eaten, gnawed, weathered, threatened. Creatures feed upon it. Its roots endure pressure, and yet it stands. The center of this mythic universe is therefore not something perfect and invulnerable. It is alive, and because it is alive, it bears damage. Perhaps that is one reason the image has endured for so long. A living thing holding worlds together, not because nothing harms it, but because it continues despite what harms it. Among the regions connected with the old cosmology is Asgard, associated particularly with the Æsir gods. Midgard, the human enclosure. Jotunheim, associated with the Jotnar. Vanaheim, connected with the Vanir. Alfheim, with elves. There are regions of mist, fire, and the dead. But these names are not pieces on a modern fantasy game board. Their boundaries shift depending on which poem or later prose description we are reading. The old storytellers seem less interested in giving us exact geography than in telling us who can cross a boundary, why they cross it, and what happens after they do. Travel matters in Norse mythology. Thor travels, Odin wanders, Loki crosses boundaries constantly. Gods ride toward meetings, messengers journey toward the dead. Giants enter divine halls, gods enter giant halls. Roads connect worlds that are never entirely isolated from one another. One famous connection between the human and divine realms is Bifrost, a burning, shimmering bridge. Later imagination often associates it with the rainbow. It is beautiful, but like almost everything in Norse mythology, it is not permanent. The old stories know that one day even the road of the gods will fail. That day is far ahead. For now, the worlds are young. The gods establish halls. They gather, they build, they feast, they argue. They begin accumulating the stories by which we will later know them. And among those gods, one figure keeps moving toward whatever knowledge remains hidden. Odin. Odin is difficult to reduce to one title. He is associated with kingship, war, poetry, the dead, magic, runes, ecstasy, and wisdom. But if we follow one thread through his stories tonight, it is this: Odin wants to know. He wants knowledge even when knowledge has a cost, perhaps especially then. He walks, questions, tests, sacrifices, disguises himself, visits beings who may know things he does not, challenges the wise, questions the dead. He is a king who repeatedly leaves the security of kingship. In many stories, Odin does not appear as a shining ruler seated comfortably above creation. He appears as a traveler, an older man, a cloak, a broad hat, a single eye, a stranger arriving where no one expected him. Someone who may already know more about you than you know about him. One famous story explains the missing eye. Odin seeks a drink from the well associated with Ymir, a source of deep wisdom. The drink has a price, his eye. The exchange is unmistakable. Knowledge is not free. To see more, Odin accepts seeing less. The story does not tell us that wisdom makes his future comfortable. Quite the opposite. The more Odin learns, the more clearly he seems to understand what is waiting at the end of the age. His knowledge contains Ragnarök, the death of gods, the wolf, the serpent, fire, the breaking of the world he is trying to preserve. And still, he continues asking questions. Another famous passage comes from Havamal, a poem whose material includes sayings, advice, wisdom, and Odin's account of seeking the runes. He describes himself hanging upon a tree, wounded by a spear, given to himself. 9 nights, no bread, no drink, until at last he perceives the runes. The story is severe, but its center is not simply pain. It is the willingness to remain inside uncertainty until something hidden becomes visible. The runes are not merely decorative letters in these stories. Writing itself was powerful. Words could preserve, name, remember, mark ownership, invoke, memorialize. A carved sign remains when a human voice is gone. For a channel called the Sleeping Archive, there is something worth noticing here. Odin's world constantly circles memory, knowledge, names, words preserved after the people who spoke them are dead. 2 ravens accompany Odin, Hugin, Munin. Their names are commonly associated with thought and memory. They fly outward, they see, they return. Thought leaves, memory comes home. Odin worries in one old poem about whether they will return, especially Munin, memory. That small anxiety makes the great god briefly recognizable. What if memory leaves and does not come back? Every archive exists because human beings have asked some version of that question. What happens if no one remembers? So stories are written, names carved, songs repeated, objects buried with the dead, poems memorized, chronicles copied. And centuries later, someone opens the surviving pages beneath electric light, trying to hear voices from rooms that disappeared long ago. Odin also seeks wisdom through contests of knowledge. In Vafthrûdnismál, he journeys to question the giant Vafthrûdnir. The exchange becomes a contest, question after question. The structure of the cosmos, ancient events, what happened before, what will happen after. Again, Odin travels toward someone outside the divine order, because that being may possess knowledge he needs. The supposed enemy may know something the King of Gods does not. And again, the boundary between gods and giants becomes less simple. The Jotnar do not merely represent brute strength. Some are keepers of ancient knowledge. They remember farther back. They know things rooted in times before the present order. Odin's wisdom, therefore, comes partly from crossing boundaries, from listening where certainty would prefer not to listen. But knowledge does not prevent fate. That fact will follow Odin through the entire mythology. He gathers information. He prepares. He gathers the dead. He seeks counsel. He acts. And somewhere ahead, Fenrir is still waiting. The gods themselves do not belong to one perfectly unified family. The traditions remember two major groups, the Æsir and the Vanir. The distinctions are not always simple, but among the Æsir are figures such as Odin and Thor. The Vanir are particularly associated with gods including Njörður, Freyr, and Freya. At some distant point in mythic time, the two groups fight. The reasons are preserved imperfectly. Völuspá remembers an early war in the world, and later traditions help organize what may once have been a more complicated body of stories. We do not need to pretend we possess a complete chronicle. What matters is that the gods themselves remember conflict among divine powers. Eventually, peace is made. Hostages are exchanged. The two groups become intertwined. The divine order that later mythology presents as familiar is therefore partly the result of reconciliation after conflict. Njörður comes among the Æsir. He is strongly associated with sea travel, wealth, and prosperity. For people whose lives depended upon ships, weather, fishing, trade, and dangerous crossings, a divine figure associated with favorable seafaring would not have been a small thing. The sea in the northern world could feed a household, carry a traveler toward wealth, or erase both ship and crew beneath cold water. The same landscape that supported life could take it. Njörður's children, Freyr and Freya, become two of the most prominent Vanir figures. Freyr is associated with fertility, prosperity, peace, good seasons, and the abundance of the earth. His stories also connect him to a remarkable ship, Skíðblatnir, which can carry the gods yet be folded when not needed. There is something wonderfully practical about divine magic in Norse mythology. A ship large enough for extraordinary travel that can be packed away afterward. Freyr also possesses a shining boar, Gullinbursti, whose golden bristles give light. Again, an old story turns objects into wonders. A hammer, a ring, a ship, a spear, a boar of gold. The gods' world is filled with things made by extraordinary craftsmen, often dwarfs, whose skill repeatedly produces objects that shape the future. Freya is even harder to confine to one idea. Love, beauty, desire, magic, precious objects, battle, death, grief. Her stories move through all of them. She is associated with the practice called Sæðr, a form of magic that later tradition also connects with Odin. She has a famous necklace, Brisingamen. She travels, she searches, she weeps for an absent husband in some traditions, and her tears are associated with gold. She also receives a portion of those who die in battle. Another reminder that Valhalla is not the only destination imagined for the dead. The old gods are rarely only one thing. Thor is not simply thunder. Odin is not simply wisdom. Freya is not simply love. Loki is certainly not simply mischief. Their stories accumulated across generations, and the result is complicated, contradictory, sometimes beautiful, sometimes uncomfortable. That complexity is not something we need to repair. It is part of what survived. And among these many gods, one begins to make his presence felt in a very different way from Odin. Where Odin questions, Thor often acts. Where Odin disguises himself, Thor arrives carrying a hammer. And sometimes he wakes to discover that the hammer is gone. Thor enters the surviving mythology with a different kind of energy from Odin. Strength, protection, thunder, a journey toward danger, and always Mjolnir, the hammer. Thor travels frequently into regions associated with the Jötnar. Many of his stories have the shape of folk tales. A journey begins, a strange companion appears, a challenge is issued, someone eats too much, someone misunderstands the rules. Something enormous appears just beyond the firelight. Thor becomes angry, Loki becomes clever, and eventually, someone discovers that nothing was quite what it first seemed. These stories can become loud in modern retellings, but around an old fire, they can also feel surprisingly domestic. Meals, sleeping arrangements, boasting, embarrassment, hospitality, bad bargains, missing possessions, people discovering that the stranger at the table is more dangerous than expected. One of the best-known stories begins with something almost ordinary. Thor wakes up and cannot find his hammer. Mjolnir is gone. For a god whose identity is closely connected to that weapon, this is no small inconvenience. Thor searches, Loki becomes involved, and eventually the trail leads to a Jötun named Thrymr. Thrymr claims to possess the hammer. He has hidden it, and he will return it only for an extraordinary price. Freya as his bride. Freya refuses very firmly. So another plan develops. Thor himself will travel as the bride. Loki will accompany him. It is difficult to tell this story without noticing something important about the people who preserved it. They were perfectly willing to let their thunder god become part of the joke. Thor is dressed for the wedding. The disguise is prepared, and the two travelers go to recover Mjolnir. At the wedding feast, the disguised Thor eats enormously. The suspicious bridegroom notices. Loki explains, "The bride has been so excited, he says, that she has not eaten for days. Then Thrymr notices the terrifying intensity of the bride's eyes. Again, Loki provides an explanation. She has not slept. Too much anticipation. Eventually, the hammer is brought out as part of the wedding ceremony. Mjolnir comes within Thor's reach. And once the hammer is back in his hands, the disguise has served its purpose. Thor restores the order that theft disrupted. The story is funny, strange, and unmistakably old. But Mjolnir is more than a weapon in the surviving cultural record. Hammer-shaped amulets have been found archaeologically. Some come from a period when older Norse traditions and Christianity existed beside one another. A small hammer worn against the body could communicate identity, protection, or connection with an older divine order during a changing religious world. Objects sometimes tell us what manuscripts cannot. A poem can disappear, a storyteller's voice can vanish, but metal survives in the earth. A pendant waits, a grave remains, a carved stone stands through centuries of rain, and one day someone finds it. That too belongs to the archive. Another Thor story begins with a journey toward the sea. Thor travels with the giant Ymir. Their relationship is not comfortable, and Thor, as often happens in his stories, pushes the ordinary activity far beyond what anyone else intended. They need bait. Thor acquires the head of an ox. Then they row. Ymir wants to stop. Thor continues farther. The boat moves into deeper water. There, beneath the surface, lies something Thor has been fated to meet since long before this fishing trip began. Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent. The enormous creature associated with the sea surrounding the human world. Thor lowers the bait. The serpent takes it, and suddenly the quiet act of fishing becomes something cosmic. Thor pulls. The serpent rises. The sea becomes dangerous around them. The old poem describes a confrontation between Thunder God and World Serpent, two enemies who will eventually meet again at Ragnarök. For a moment, the final battle seems to have arrived early. Thor reaches for Mjolnir, but the encounter does not end here. Different surviving accounts shape the conclusion somewhat differently, and later retellings often smooth them together. What matters is that the serpent returns to the sea, and Thor returns to the world above it. Neither has finished with the other. This is one of the recurring patterns of Norse myth. The ending is visible long before it arrives. Fenrir is already alive. Jörmungandr is already in the sea. Odin already knows enough to fear the wolf. Thor has already looked upon the serpent he will one day kill, and that will one day kill him. Ragnarök is therefore not a surprise twist at the end of the mythology. It is a shadow extending backward through many earlier stories. But perhaps that is why the ordinary parts matter. The feast before the final feast. The journey before the final journey. The fishing boat rocking on the water. People continue doing ordinary things, even when the future contains extraordinary endings. the sea settles again, the boat returns, and somewhere below, the serpent remains. Loki is one of the hardest figures in Norse mythology to explain cleanly. Perhaps that is appropriate. He travels with the gods, helps them, insults them, saves them from disasters, creates disasters. He changes form, crosses boundaries, uses cleverness where Thor uses force, speaks when silence might be wiser. And gradually, as the stories move toward their darker end, his relationship with the gods deteriorates. Modern retellings often want Loki to become one thing: a villain, a hero, a trickster, a misunderstood outsider. The surviving material does not cooperate easily with any single interpretation. He is useful, dangerous, funny, cruel, clever, helpful, destructive. Sometimes all within the same broad tradition. In several stories, Loki's problem begins because he creates a difficulty. Then his usefulness becomes essential because he may be the only one clever enough to fix it. That makes him difficult for the gods to remove from their world, until eventually something happens that cannot be repaired. Loki's family also becomes entangled with the future destruction of the gods. 3 of his children are especially important: Fenrir, Jörmungandr, and Hel, the wolf, the serpent, and a figure associated with the realm of certain dead. The gods become afraid of these children. They do not simply wait to discover what each will become, they act. Jörmungandr is cast into the sea, where it grows until it is imagined surrounding Midgard. Hel is assigned a realm connected with those who die outside the heroic battlefield ideal that later popular culture emphasizes so strongly. And Fenrir remains among the gods for a time, growing and growing. Only Tyr is willing to approach the wolf closely enough to feed him. Eventually, the gods decide Fenrir must be bound. They test restraints. The wolf breaks them. They try stronger chains. He breaks those too. Then they obtain something different: Gleipnir, a magical binding, thin, soft, almost impossible to believe as a restraint for a creature that has already broken iron. Fenrir suspects deception. He agrees to test it only if one of the gods places a hand inside his mouth as a guarantee. The gods hesitate. Tyr does not. He places his hand between the wolf's jaws. Fenrir struggles. Gleipnir holds. The wolf understands what has happened, and Tyr loses his hand. The story can be understood as courage, as sacrifice, as necessary protection, as betrayal. Perhaps it is all of them. The gods have prevented the danger they fear, but only temporarily. And they have done so by breaking trust. In Norse mythology, the actions taken to postpone disaster often become part of the road leading toward it. Fate does not always arrive from somewhere outside. Sometimes people build portions of it themselves. Not every old Norse story moves toward darkness. There are treasures, craftsmen, competitions, strange objects. Things made so skillfully that they seem impossible. Much of the divine world is filled not merely with magic, but with craftsmanship. A hammer forged, a ship built, a spear shaped, a ring created, golden hair made, a boar whose bristles shine. The makers are often dwarfs, figures whose role in the surviving mythology is more complex than the small underground miners of later fantasy convention. They make objects that even gods cannot make for themselves. Mjolnir emerges from one such sequence of stories. So does Odin's spear, Gungnir, a ring named Draupnir, Freyr's extraordinary ship, Skíðblathnir, and the golden-bristled boar, Gullinbursti. The stories often carry humor alongside wonder. Loki interferes, boasts are made, bets placed, craftsmen compete, and afterward, the divine world possesses objects that will continue appearing through myth after myth. There is something deeply human about this fascination with made things. The old northern world depended upon skill. Wood shaped correctly could become a ship. Iron could become a tool, a nail, a weapon. Wool became clothing. Timber became shelter. Survival in difficult landscapes often depended upon whether someone knew how to make something well. So perhaps it is unsurprising that divine treasures are not merely wished into existence. They are forged, constructed, crafted. Even gods need makers. Another famous story concerns the wall around Asgard. A mysterious builder offers to construct an extraordinary fortification, but his price is enormous. The sun, the moon, and Freya. The gods agree only under strict conditions. The work must be completed within a limited time. The builder can have only restricted help, but he possesses a remarkable stallion, Svadilfari. The horse is so powerful, and the work moves so quickly, that the gods begin to realize their bargain may actually have to be honored. The impossible wall is becoming possible. And when a problem among the gods needs cleverness, eyes turn toward Loki. Fix this. Loki changes form, becoming a mare. He draws Svadilfari away. The work slows, the deadline is missed. And from Loki's strange adventure eventually comes Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse later associated with Odin. There are stories in Norse mythology that resist being made dignified. They are strange because they were strange. The archive does not need to smooth them into respectable modern stories. Their strangeness is part of what survived. Imagine now, not a battle, but a hall. A feast. Light from fire. Cups passed from hand to hand. Food, stories, boasts, old resentments. The Norse gods spend a surprising amount of mythic time at feasts. The feast is not merely decoration. Hospitality matters deeply in the old literature. Where someone sits, what they are offered, whether an oath is respected, whether a guest behaves properly. A hall can be safe until words make it dangerous. One poem, Lokasena, imagines Loki entering a feast of the gods and attacking them not with a weapon, but with speech. Insult follows insult. Accusation follows accusation. Old scandals are dragged into the light. Loki mocks, provokes, exposes. The poem is difficult material to treat as straightforward historical theology. It is literature, satire, mythic insult, and a reminder that the gods themselves could be subjects of irreverence. The divine hall is not populated by flawless moral ideals. These beings argue, fail, desire, cheat, boast, lose their tempers. Whatever earlier worshippers believed about them, the literary gods preserved in the medieval sources remain complicated personalities. They are memorable partly because they are not polished smooth. Thor eventually arrives, and the atmosphere changes. Where Loki has used words, Thor threatens force. There is something almost inevitable about the pairing. Loki moving through language, Thor answering with the possibility of Mjolnir. Feasts also connect the divine world to Ægir, a figure strongly associated with the sea. His hall becomes a place where gods gather. The sea itself becomes host. Imagine an old northern audience hearing such a story. People for whom the ocean was never merely scenery. The sea carried ships, food, trade, travelers, news, wealth, and death. To give the sea a hall, a host, a personality, is to make something dangerous familiar enough to sit beside for one evening. Outside the hall, water continues against the shore. Inside, the gods continue talking. For now, the wolf is bound. The serpent remains beneath the sea. Baldr is alive. Ragnarök has not yet arrived. There is still time for food, for drink, for arguments that do not end the world. And perhaps that is what makes the later loss of this world matter. Before a world can end, it first has to feel inhabited. Time continues. The gods travel, feast, compete, argue, marry, make promises, break them. Thor crosses dangerous roads and returns. Odin seeks more knowledge. Loki solves problems, then becomes one. And above it all, Yggdrasil continues to stand. Near the tree, the Norns remain. Urður, verdandi, skuld. The exact nature and number of beings called Norns can vary across the wider literature, but these three names have become the most famous. They are associated with fate, with what has unfolded, with what is unfolding, and with what may be owed or yet to come. But Norse ideas about fate do not require human beings or gods to become meaningless puppets. People still choose, gods still act, promises still matter, courage still matters. Thor still lifts the hammer, Tyr still places his hand in Fenrir's mouth. Odin still seeks wisdom, even while knowing that wisdom will not erase his ending. This is one of the strange tensions running beneath Norse mythology. An ending may be known, and yet action still matters. Perhaps because how one reaches the ending matters. Perhaps because courage is meaningful precisely when certainty cannot be obtained. Odin knows Ragnarök lies somewhere ahead. His search for wisdom does not save him from that knowledge. Perhaps it only gives him more of it. Imagine knowing the shape of your ending and continuing to prepare anyway. Gathering warriors, seeking counsel, questioning the wise, asking the dead, sending ravens outward, learning everything that can be learned, even when none of it can permanently prevent what is coming. Wisdom does not always mean escape. Sometimes wisdom means seeing clearly and continuing. Then, among the gods, someone begins to dream. Baldr. And the stories grow quieter. Baldr is remembered as a son of Odin and Frigg, a figure associated in the surviving tradition with beauty, brightness, goodness, and the affection of the gods. Then he begins to dream. Dark dreams, dreams that seem to suggest his death. In an old poem usually called Baldr's Draumar, Baldr's dreams trouble the gods. Odin rides toward the world below, seeking knowledge from a dead seeress. He wants to know why preparations seem to be waiting in the realm of the dead, why a place is being made ready, what the dreams mean. Knowledge comes, but knowledge does not bring comfort. That pattern should feel familiar now. Odin asks, Odin learns, the future remains. In the fuller story preserved by Snorri, Baldr's mother Frigg attempts to protect him. She seeks promises from things throughout the world that they will not harm her son. Stone, metal, trees, diseases, animals, poisons, things that might wound are made to swear. And when the gods discover that Baldr cannot be harmed, his safety becomes a kind of game. They throw things at him, weapons, stones, objects that should injure. Nothing does. Baldr stands untouched. The gods laugh. For a little while, fate appears to have been defeated by careful preparation. But one small thing has been overlooked: mistletoe. In Snorri's telling, Frigg considered it too young or too harmless to require an oath. Loki learns this. He fashions a weapon from it, and he approaches Hörður, Baldr's blind brother, who has not joined the game because he cannot see where Baldr is standing. Loki guides him, places the mistletoe in his hand, helps him aim, and Baldr falls. There is no need to hurry past this part of the story, and no need to make it louder. The old myths sometimes understand grief best when they leave space around it. The gods who could fight giants, cross worlds, bind monsters, shape land from the body of the first being, and travel over the bridge between realms, cannot simply undo what has happened. Baldr is dead. The event matters beyond the death of one god. It feels like a change in the weather of the mythology itself. Earlier disasters could often be repaired. A hammer could be recovered, a wall prevented from being completed, a stolen treasure retrieved. A problem caused by Loki could sometimes be solved by Loki. But this time, the story does not return to normal. Something has broken that cleverness cannot restore, and the mythology begins turning toward its final age. Hermod rides toward the world below, attempting to bring Baldr back. The journey takes him toward Hell. The dead are not all imagined in one place in Norse tradition, and the surviving material surrounding the afterlife is far more varied than the familiar popular picture of every warrior entering Valhalla. But Baldr has gone where ordinary strength cannot simply reach him. Hell agrees to a condition. If everything in the world weeps for Baldr, he may return. And according to the story, nearly everything does. People, animals, stone, wood, metal. The world mourns. But one figure refuses, a woman called Thök. Later tradition identifies her with Loki in disguise. She will not weep, and because one voice withholds its grief, Baldr remains among the dead. Whether every part of this familiar narrative reaches unchanged into the pre-Christian period, we cannot know. The older poetic material preserves Baldr's death and its connection with the disaster to come, while Snorri provides the most complete, connected version known to most modern readers. That is often how the archive works. An older poem gives us a broken outline. A later writer gives it shape. And somewhere between them, we try to listen carefully, without pretending we can remove the centuries. After Baldr's death, Loki's place among the gods is transformed. The surviving traditions describe punishment, binding, a serpent above him, venom falling. His wife, Sigyn, remains beside him, holding a vessel beneath the poison. When she must move the bowl to empty it, the venom reaches Loki. He struggles, the earth shakes. And there he remains, waiting within the mythology for the bonds to fail. Other restraints are waiting too. Fenrir is bound. Jörmungandr remains beneath the sea. The dangers the gods attempted to contain have not disappeared. They have only been delayed. And then, the old prophecy begins to move toward fulfillment. Ragnarök. The word Ragnarök is commonly understood through the idea of the fate or final destiny of the gods. Modern imagination often turns it immediately into an apocalypse, a battle, fire, monsters, a final spectacle. But tonight, we can hear it differently. Not as something rushing toward us, as an old prophecy being remembered from very far away. First comes winter, Fimbulwinter, a winter beyond ordinary winter. One season of cold follows another. The familiar rhythm of the world breaks down. Snow, wind, cold. No ordinary summer between them. The landscape that once supported ordinary human life becomes increasingly difficult. But the breakdown is not only in the weather. Human relationships begin failing too. Kinship breaks. Violence increases. Old protections weaken. Voluspa speaks of an axe age, a sword age, a wind age, a wolf age, a world in which things once trusted can no longer be trusted. The mythology's ending, therefore, begins not simply when monsters attack, but when order itself stops holding. Family, season, boundary, promise. Things that once told people where they stood become uncertain. Then the restraints fail. Fenrir breaks free. Jörmungandr moves from the sea. Loki's bonds no longer hold. Naglfar, the terrible ship associated with the final events, is set loose. The bridge between worlds cannot remain untouched. Yggdrasil itself trembles. The tree that has stood through the entire age of the gods shakes. Imagine that quietly. Not noise. A leaf moving where there is no wind. A root under pressure. A branch trembling high beyond sight. The center of the world, knowing that the old order is nearly finished. Heimdall sounds Gjallarhorn. Its call moves across the worlds. The gods gather, and Odin, even now, seeks counsel once more. At the edge of the ending, the seeker of wisdom is still seeking wisdom. There is something almost painfully consistent about that. Odin never stops being Odin, not even now. A later writer gives it shape, and somewhere between them, we try to listen carefully, without pretending we can remove the centuries. After Baldr's death, Loki's place among the gods is transformed. The surviving traditions describe punishment, binding, a serpent above him, venom falling. His wife Sigyn remains beside him, holding a vessel beneath the poison. When she must move the bowl to empty it, the venom reaches Loki. He struggles, the earth shakes, and there he remains, waiting within the mythology for the bonds to fail. Other restraints are waiting too. Fenrir is bound. Jörmungandr remains beneath the sea. The dangers the gods attempted to contain have not disappeared. They have only been delayed. And then, the old prophecy begins to move toward fulfillment. Ragnarök. The forces that have waited beyond the gods' order approach. Surtur comes from the south, associated with fire. Fenrir advances. Jörmungandr rises from the sea. Loki returns among the enemies of the gods. We do not need to imagine the noise. We can imagine distance instead. A dark horizon. A line of fire far away. The sea moving strangely against the shore. Wind crossing an empty field. A tree trembling where no hand touches it. Odin meets Fenrir. Thor meets the serpent. Freyr faces Surtur. Tyr faces Garmr in Snorri's connected telling. Heimdall and Loki meet one another. The old order reaches its final contest. And one by one, figures who seemed permanent are not. Odin falls to Fenrir. For all the wisdom gathered, for all the questions asked, for all the preparation, the wolf still reaches him. His son Vidar moves forward. Vidar avenges his father. Fenrir is killed. Thor fights Jörmungandr. The serpent that has surrounded the human world for so long is finally struck down. Thor takes 9 steps away. Then the serpent's poison overcomes him. The thunder god falls. Freyr falls before Surtur. Tyr and Garma destroy one another. Loki and Heimdall reach their end. And finally, fire moves across the world. Surtur's flame consumes what remains. The earth sinks into the sea, and then silence. If this were only a story about destruction, we could stop here. The gods gone, the world submerged, the old tree shaken, the great halls emptied. But the surviving prophecy does not stop here. After the end, the earth returns. It rises again from the sea, green, renewed. Water falls from high places. Fields produce. The world that seemed finished is not finished. Some gods remain, others return. Baldr, whose death announced the beginning of the old world's final decline, comes back. Hörðr is there too. The sons of Thor survive and inherit Mjolnir. Vidar and Vali remain. The younger generation walks where the older gods once walked. And then comes one of the quietest images in the entire mythological cycle. They find game pieces in the grass, golden pieces remembered from the world before Ragnarök. Not a weapon, not a crown, not a monster. A small thing lying in new grass after the destruction of worlds. Perhaps once someone held it between their fingers. Perhaps gods sat together before the disaster, when there was still time for games. Now the piece remains, while much of the world that surrounded it does not. After fire, grass. After the breaking of worlds, something small waiting to be found. Human life also continues. Leif and Niflheim, 2 human survivors hidden through the catastrophe, who become part of humanity's renewed beginning. Light also returns. The sun has a daughter who follows her mother's road. Across the renewed sky, light moves again. Morning returns. And now, the story has done almost everything it needed to do. The world began in emptiness. Ice reached toward fire. Ymir emerged. The first gods shaped land beneath a new sky. Human beings opened their eyes beside the shore. Yggdrasil stretched through worlds. Odin sought wisdom. Thor crossed dangerous roads. Loki moved between friendship and betrayal. Baldr dreamed. The old order ended, and the earth came back from the sea. But there is no reason for us to leave immediately. The old stories have become quiet again. So for a little while, we can remain in the world afterward. There are no battles here. No prophecy left to fulfill. No wolf straining against a chain. No horn calling anyone toward war. Only land. Imagine the renewed earth in the hours before sunrise. A valley still wet from rain. Low clouds resting between distant mountains. Grass moving gently beside the water. The sea has settled. Its surface rises, then falls against dark stones. Again, and again, and again. Somewhere inland, a narrow river moves between banks newly covered in green. The water is cold, clear. It passes beneath branches, around stone, through places that do not yet have names. There are birds eventually. Not many, just enough for morning to feel inhabited. A call from far away. Then silence again. Light gathers slowly behind the mountains. Not suddenly. There is no need for sudden things now. The black sky becomes deep blue. The blue softens near the horizon. A first line of pale light rests against the edge of the world. And if people live here, they are not kings, not warriors, not poets trying to preserve the names of gods. Perhaps someone is simply awake before the others. A door opens. Cold air enters a small room. Someone steps outside. The ground is damp beneath their feet. Smoke rises from another roof farther down the valley. A fire is beginning somewhere. Not the fire of Muspel, not Surtur's flame. Just an ordinary fire. Wood placed carefully. A spark protected from the wind. A little heat for morning. There is something deeply different about an ordinary fire after a story like Ragnarök. At the beginning of the old mythology, fire was a force at the edge of creation. At the end, fire consumed the world. But here, afterward, fire is small enough to hold in a hearth. Someone warms their hands. Someone prepares food. Someone looks toward the sky, not searching for prophecy, but checking the weather. The world has become ordinary again, and ordinary is not a small thing. A path begins near the houses. It crosses the grass, fades slightly where rain has softened the ground, then continues toward the trees. No one knows yet how many feet will eventually walk it. Children, travelers, hunters, people returning home late in the evening. For now, it is only a path. Higher on the hillside, water rests in hollows of stone. Clouds pass through their reflection. The wind moves the grass one direction, then another. Far away, snow remains along the highest ridge. It will melt slowly, feed streams, enter rivers, reach the sea. Nothing hurries. The seasons begin again. Spring becomes summer. Summer leans toward autumn. Leaves change. Night arrives a little earlier. Then winter. Snow against roofs. Ice along the water's edge. Footprints outside in the morning. And after winter, another spring. The old northern stories understood cycles. Darkness does not prevent morning. Winter does not prevent spring. Even Ragnarök, in the tradition that survived, does not prevent green fields from returning. The ending contains another beginning. Not because nothing was lost. Much was lost. Odin does not simply return to his old hall. Thor does not walk back down the road carrying his hammer. The new world is not the old world pretending nothing happened. It is something after. And maybe, for a sleep story, that is enough. The world does not need to be restored exactly as it was. Morning only needs somewhere to arrive. The fire in the settlement burns lower now. The person who woke early has gone back inside. Mist lies over the water. The mountains remain where they are. Yggdrasil, if we imagine it still somewhere beyond ordinary sight, does not need our attention. The gods do not need us to remember every name. The stories have waited centuries already. They can wait until morning. You do not need to remember where Ymir came from. You do not need to remember which root reached which well. You do not need to hold the names of every god, every world, every creature, or every road between them. That is what the archive is for. It keeps the story when you no longer need to. Somewhere beyond the last houses, the river continues through the valley. It passes beneath trees, past stone, toward the distant sea. The sky grows lighter. The fire grows quieter. And the old northern world, with all its gods, its giants, its wolves, its wisdom, its endings, and its beginnings, settles once more into silence. Tonight, the archive can close here. There will be other doors, other shelves, other worlds waiting in the dark. But none of them need to be opened now. The archive will be here when you return.